Ah yes, Karate Kid Part 3. The one where Daniel hits his head while fishing with Mr. Miyagi. Then he's magically sent to China during the 1600s, where we meet Miyagi's ancestors, and there's a female protagonist. And there's Hong Kong-style wire fights, and a pirate crease. Oh yeah, that never ended up happening. Karate Kid trilogy writer Robert Mark Kamen was feeling bored and jaded about doing a formulaic sequel to Karate Kid Part 2. He felt things needed a big shake-up. However, the studio was not interested in this particular take on the series. So they hired another writer, and the studio was unsatisfied with their take too. So when offered a lot more money, Kamen decided to do the trilogy capper in a more familiar fashion. And it waxed Ralph Macchio and director John G. Avildsen off. So sit back, relax, grab a pot of mac and cheese, and let's dive into the gooey center of the Karate Kid Part 3. Even though the third film in the franchise didn't end up going the fantastical route that Robert Mark Kamen intended, we did end up getting something sort of close in 1989. A more fantastical take on the franchise came in the form of the Karate Kid animated series. In it, a magical shrine is stolen from its resting place in Okinawa, and it's up to Miyagi and Daniel to recover it. They travel the world with their Okinawan friend Taki, and predictably meet numerous opportunities to fight their way out of bad situations. The show had 13 episodes and only ran for one season. The intro with the car landing on the cliff would have broken their backs, okay? It's a cartoon, I know, shut up. Real quick, here's what you need to know about the first season, okay? Mr. Miyagi wrestles an alligator and wins. He chops a tree in half with his bare hand. Daniel wears a loincloth, but didn't have to. And Mr. Miyagi beats up a jaguar. Wow, we've come a long way from Reseda. You've changed, Ma. John G. Avildsen, the director of all three Karate Kid movies, was underwhelmed by the script for Part 3. He felt it didn't move the story forward enough. Ralph Macchio felt the same. I guess everyone was contractually obligated though, because even though they didn't like the direction the movie was going, they still made it. Career frustrations from key members of the Karate Kid franchise made the Karate Kid 3 more of a burden than an honor to complete. The movie starts with a 4-minute and 30-second recap of the first two movies. Isn't that funny how they used to have to jog your memory before a sequel began? Because renting movies was new and everything wasn't so readily available like it is with streaming and the internet, and there weren't YouTubers recapping everything for you. Anyway, we see Kreese giving up on his dojo and handing the keys back to his war buddy, Terry Silver, who bought the dojo for Kreese in the first place. When I was a kid, I remember being happy that the movie's villain was more evil and energetic this time around. That was part of the fun. Having a crazy villain that would shake up our hero's world. Terry Silver vows to put all his commitments on the back burner for a couple of weeks so that he can torment a recently graduated high schooler and his geriatric sensei. Rich people are bored. Mr. Miyagi and Daniel arrive back in LA from Okinawa, both now single after things didn't work out with Kamiko or Yuki. They find out that their apartment building is being demolished and Miyagi is out of a job. But no worries, because Daniel hatches a brilliant plan of opening a bonsai store. Randy Heller, who plays Daniel's mom, makes a brief appearance in this, which is awesome, especially since she was entirely nixed from Part 2. It was actually Ralph Macchio that requested for Randy to appear in this sequel. Her character is back in New Jersey watching over Uncle Louie, who has emphysema. Terry Silver hires the bad boy of karate, Mike Barnes, to be his secret weapon on the mat. After Barnes and Snake and this guy intimidate Daniel a few times to get him to enter the All Valley tournament, Daniel finally caves in and signs up. This guy is Jonathan Avildsen. He's John G. Avildsen's son. He did a screen test for the part of Mike Barnes, but his dad went in another direction for that character. However, Jonathan impressed everyone so much with his screen test that the character of Snake was born. Oh yeah, and meet Daniel's friend, Jessica, played by Robin Lively. I first saw her in the TV movie series Not Quite Human and its sequels. In Karate Kid though, she quickly puts Daniel in the friend zone, and then by the midpoint of the movie, she's off to Ohio to patch things up with her off-screen ex-boyfriend. What was the point of even having her as a character then? Well, the reason for this strange pairing was that there was supposed to be a romantic relationship between Jessica and Daniel. However, Macchio and crew felt uncomfortable with the whole idea once it was found out that Lively was 17 years old and Macchio was 27. There were also rumors that Macchio didn't want his wife to get jealous. I don't know if that part is really true, but I do know that the Jessica character was turned into a friend that leaves too early in the movie and doesn't return for another 30 years until Cobra Kai. However, Jessica ends up being a big part of the Karate Kid universe later on. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen Cobra Kai. But Daniel LaRusso ends up marrying Jessica's cousin, Amanda. Jessica hooked Amanda and Daniel up when Amanda moved to LA. The two hit it off, married, and had 2 children, which is an awesome way to connect everything together. Jessica is now a part of the LaRusso family line. She even has a bar fight for no reason in season 5 with some angry soccer moms. I'm serious, for no reason. And it's glorious. It makes sense that the pair didn't make it far though. Every time she hangs out with Daniel in this movie, something life-threatening ends up happening to them. The relationship between Daniel and Mr. Miyagi is stretched thin in part 3. He and Mr. Miyagi's karate is about balance and self-defense only. That's why Mr. Miyagi refuses to train Daniel for another tournament. Daniel gets desperate and starts training with Terry Silver, who worms his way into Daniel's life because remember, he took a few weeks off of work to be a dedicated psychopath. Terry, played by Thomas Ian Griffith, is so much fun to watch in this movie. He's over the top, yet his acting is good and full of energy. He's a real threat to Daniel and Miyagi. He seems like he's hopped up on cocaine. And years later in season 4 of Cobra Kai, we find out that Silver was indeed on cocaine during this time. There you go, that explains a lot. After Daniel gains confidence from Silver's quick yet maniacally effective training, he goes to a dance club and breaks a kid's nose. That kid was paid to harass Daniel by Terry, but instead he gets a broken nose, and Terry, a rich guy, doesn't honor the payment. Brutal and cheap. After Terry, Kreese, and Mike Barnes attack Daniel back at the Cobra Kai dojo, Mr. Miyagi intervenes in the nick of time. Now convinced that this is a matter of survival, Mr. Miyagi trains Daniel, and Daniel flips his opponent over in a victory. Listen to your heart. The music video for Listen to Your Heart didn't reach the heights that a song like You're the Best Around did, but you gotta give it to the lead singer. He knows how to remove a wedgie while lip-syncing his heart out. Look how discreet. What if Johnny Lawrence returned for part 3, and he had the same storyline as Mike Barnes? Apparently, there was a moment in time where Johnny Lawrence almost returned for this movie, but Avildsen and company decided to make a brand new character with Mike Barnes. It's much better that Lawrence learns his lesson after the end of parts 1 and 2. That way, he has 30 years to be humbled for his triumphant and hilarious return in Cobra Kai. Sean Kanan, aka Mike Barnes, showed up to an open casting call for Karate Kid 3 where thousands of hopefuls were trying their luck at getting the part. Here's what he said about getting singled out at the audition in an interview with Men's Health. Avildsen's making his way up this line, stopping intermittently, and I knew I'd have to get this guy's attention. And I locked eyes and got his attention, and he stopped and he asked me to do a quick improv, and I did. And he said, okay, I buy it. And he sent me inside the soundstage where they were doing the screen test. And there's Ralph Macchio. They said, go intimidate him. So I did. And eventually I got the role. During the audition, Kanan literally backed Ralph Macchio into a corner. He wanted to be remembered, and he was. Sean Kanan really committed to the role of Mike Barnes, so much so that he almost died doing so. After doing this take over and over and over again, continually slamming down on his stomach, he went on his way without thinking too much about it. When he felt a pain in his stomach, he took some aspirin to smooth it out. A few days later, he finally went to the hospital and found out he had been bleeding internally to a dangerous degree. He had surgery and recovered, but man, that's scary. Especially for such a minor stunt to have caused this. Yeesh. Thomas Ian Griffith was only 4 months older than Ralph Macchio while playing Terry Silver. You would have never guessed it by looking at them side by side. I think it's the imposing stature of Terry and how he carries himself that really sells the age difference. The Terry Silver character wasn't even invented yet when Griffith first auditioned. Martin Kove, who plays John Kreese, found out he wouldn't be as available as he needed to be during the filming of Part 3. In an earlier draft, Kreese was the main orchestrator of terror on Daniel and Miyagi. With Kove splitting his time with Karate Kid 3 and his new show, Hard Time on Planet Earth, his character was downsized. When Thomas Ian Griffith read for director John G. Avildsen, Avildsen loved what he was doing. He told Griffith to come back and screen test again. When he did, the part had been rewritten and the character had been turned into the full-blown Terry Silver that we all know and love today. Griffith felt like he was being too over the top at times, but Avildsen thought it was great and told the actor that he wanted every little kid in America kicking his shins. So Griffith buckled down and embraced the camp. Griffith is also an accomplished screenwriter and had become a full-time writer by the time the Cobra Kai team came calling all those years later. He often writes alongside his wife, Mary Page Keller, which I think is great. She's an actress and a writer, and she's awesome. I loved her role in the movie Beginners and all the flashback scenes as Ewan McGregor's mom. It was a highlight of that movie. Anyway, Griffith and Keller have written together on the TV shows Grimm, Dolly Parton's Heartstrings, and Virgin River, which is on Netflix. In a quote from Entertainment Weekly, Griffith says this about reprising the role of Terry Silver for Cobra Kai. "You know, I'd been working as an actor my whole career. Our two boys were young, and I was out of town literally 8 months out of the year. I'd be in Eastern Europe or wherever, and I'd be hearing these little milestones I've been missing in their lives. I said, I have to make a change. We had sold a couple of scripts early on, so when I got back to LA, I went to my literary agent and said, I want to do this full time. Then the horse took off in that direction. And I loved the writing process. You still get to play all the characters as you're creating. In fact, I drive my wife crazy when we're in the office. I have to say all my dialogue out loud to make sure it works. My wife always said, you'll be back eventually. And I was like, if the right role comes along. Not thinking this would be it at all. Then when it came up, she was the one that said, you have to do this. This would be incredible. And my boys watched the series and they were like, Dad, you're doing this. The Terry Silver character made an impact outside of the franchise as well. The video game company Technos Japan disclosed that the boss character, Duke, in Super Double Dragon was based on Terry Silver. They share similar traits, such as their physical appearance and both being malevolent martial arts masters who founded their own chain of dojos. Oh, and random but true, Paula Abdul choreographed all the dancing in this movie. So we can thank her for this and this. Back in 1989, Ralph Macchio was getting tired of playing a kid. In Karate Kid 1, he was 23 years old. In Karate Kid 2, he was 25. And as mentioned before, he was 27 when Part 3 rolled along. Not only that, but he was also starting to get typecast as a teenager. Not only because he's always looked younger than his years, but also because he was associated with the Karate Kid series. Kid. Since John G. Avildsen was also feeling bored by the storyline of the third film in the series, he tried to spice things up. He intended for Daniel LaRusso to die at the end of the movie, giving the character a definitive ending. In an interview with Crave Online back in 2014, this is what Avildsen revealed. I thought that Ralph's character should die at the end of the third one. He gets in a fight defending Mr. Miyagi's honor, and he dies in the fight. Miyagi feels so devastated that he says, I taught him too well. Then in the fourth one he meets the girl, but that didn't happen, so I didn't pursue it. Well, I'm glad that never happened. It would have prevented Cobra Kai from debuting, and we can't have that. Who knows, maybe Avildsen had the original ending of Rocky V on his brain. Stallone originally wrote that movie to have Rocky die at the end after a street fight. Avildsen was, after all, directing that movie right after Karate Kid 3. In his book, Waxing On, Ralph Macchio talks about a moment backstage of a play he was in with Robert De Niro and Burt Young. It was called Cuba and His Teddy Bear. After a show one night, Warren Beatty came to his dressing room and complimented him on the success of the Karate Kid films. Ralph sidestepped the issue and wanted to talk more about the play and lamented how he was starting to resent the Karate Kid. He felt like it was boxing him in. Warren Beatty tried to reassure him about the importance of one for them, Hollywood, and one for you, a personal project. Macchio wasn't hearing him clearly, though. Once Beatty left, it dawned on Macchio that the movie legend had been trying to get through to him about how lucky he was in his career. Years later, Macchio fully understood what Beatty had been trying to tell him, and the Karate Kid's importance eventually sunk in. It's something that Ralph would embrace fully as he continued the Daniel LaRusso saga with Cobra Kai. And while Karate Kid 3 may be a sore spot for Macchio, I'm glad it exists. It's bonkers and over the top, and I love it. But what about the next Karate Kid? Well, let's find out. Hey, I'm Scotty D. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to kick the subscribe button in the stomach. See you next time.